there was two types of land. You had crown land, which was basically everything owned by the crown. And then you have land rights, which were in fee simple. And those land rights in fee simple are the highest property rights that you can have to the land because the absolute ownership vests in the crown. And for evidence of that, look at the land titles registry, right? If you want to have land, you have to register it with the monarch, with the king, in through their land titles offices. And so you get these property rights in and to the land. You get to sell the land, you have rights in it to use it as you want, and so on. But it is subject, those rights are subject to reasonable laws passed by the monarch that don't violate Christian principles, of course. And they may also pass certain municipal bylaws or provincial taxing authorities that may exist as well on that land because we do not own the land outright. We do not have and cannot have a allodial title in Canada to the land. The only person, the only entity that will have that, of course, is the actual king or queen themselves. They will have that property rights.
It's so good to be with you, friends, and welcome as you join us for another informative show this first Wednesday in September. We're so grateful for each one of you here today that you're part of the Action for Canada community. Our guest speaker this evening is our good friend, David Lindsay, and the title of tonight's show is Land, Property, and Your Rights. It's September 3rd, 2025, and this is the Empower Hour. If you're joining us for the first time, I'd like to introduce you to Tanya, the founder and leader of Action for Canada. For over 10 years now, Tanya has been hard at work bringing awareness to the many critical issues facing our nation. She has a few words she wants to share with us before we bring on tonight's guest. So will you all please help me welcome Tanya Goff. Hello, Tanya.
Hi, Heather, and so good to be back. It's good to see you. We've missed you in the last few weeks, and I can't believe it. Summer is over. We're into September, and just to assure our viewers and our members, Action for Canada did not slow down. Our guest, David Lindsay, tonight, he did not slow down during the summer. He has been busy fighting the good fight. I look forward to having David on, but there was a couple of things that I wanted to cover moving into the show to support the conversation, just in case, you were away in some other country this summer or you've been living under a rock. I don't know. I don't know how you could miss the headlines, but I'm going to give you a few just to help you become aware of how quickly the, how shall I say, this reparations industry is advancing at stealing land and massive wealth from hardworking Canadians. And so just a bit of history that in 2019, the BC government passed the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. So it's called DRIPA in BC. And then they were claiming it was necessary to align with provincial laws with the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, known as UNDRIP. And I'm sure most of you all know about UNDRIP at this point. But provinces, we have found, have absolutely no authority to override Canada's constitution or our founding documents. And that's what David is going to be talking to us about tonight, about our land and our property rights and the difference between those. So this is a very important show, and I'm going to ask you to share it. You know that Action for Canada is being a little censored here and there, and so we really need to get this information out, because I always say knowledge is power, and when you have it, you got to share it and you got to use it, and the more educated the masses are, the more that they can press into their local officials. And I'm talking at the municipal level, the provincial level, and the federal level. This UNDRIP is insidious. It goes into absolutely every level of government, pushing back and trying to rob Canadians of their land. It's incredibly illegal, and we've got corrupt judges, corrupt elected officials who are pushing this along, and of course it's all with the United Nations in mind to steal all of our property, get control of our food resources, and get control of citizens of the world. It's not just Canada that's going through this, it's pretty much every Western European Christian nation. So by passing DRIPA in BC, it acted outside its lawful jurisdiction. And then even more troubling, BC is being used as a template for other provinces. And courts are now referring to DRIPA and UNDRIP in ways that threaten long-established property rights. Behind closed doors, secret meetings are taking place with Indian chiefs, and Crown land, as well as legally owned by citizen, is being negotiated away under this illegitimate framework. And so I'm just going to cover a few headlines. Just a moment as I share my page, just to make sure. And this is just a fraction. I can't even say that this is 1%. I would have to say it maybe is 0.001% on what's going on across this nation, because you'll hear about the bans in Ontario, in Manitoba. And we've got to understand, when the Europeans came to Canada, there was over 640 tribes in Canada. They never created a nation. They certainly weren't first, because there's reports of the Vikings having been here and others. The natives also, the Indians also immigrated to Canada from other lands. And so it's really quite a mess. And I think the biggest mistake Canada ever made, our founding fathers, was to sign any treaties, because the Bible is very clear. It says, when you go into a nation, do not sign treaties. This has basically been like a curse on Canada. The Indians have definitely not appreciated the amount of money that we have spent funding them, and the amount of special privilege that they've had in not paying taxes in the fishing industry. It's really quite upsetting at the end of this to ultimately be maligned as white colonialists, white supremacists. This is what they're teaching our children and indoctrinating them in the school systems. And it really needs to come to an end. If we had come in like the Muslims conquering Christian nations, brutally, forcefully massacring everybody and taking the booty, there would have been nothing left here of Canada. And the Europeans came in and used all of their ingenuity and created just a very profitable country that all of us, including the Indians, have benefited from. So it's time to start putting things back in check. So I've got about 6 or 7 titles, news headlines, and then we'll get into bringing David onto the show. So here's one: Cowichan title lands encompass multi-million-dollar mansions in Richmond. You may have heard about this unprecedented decision in British Columbia recently, where they've handed over all of this property to these bands. And the thing is that they're still in fighting. Oh, it's my property, it's your property, it's this property. It's absolutely unbelievable how they're still infighting today as they were over 150 years ago. So again, Canada to provide advanced payments on active claims to 14 Treaty Land Entitlement Committee of Manitoba First Nations. So there we go, we're in the middle of the country. Did the BC government fly the Canadian flag at half-mast recently for 81 phantom children who never existed? Yes, they did. But that's all part of the propaganda, right? Keep tying into the emotions and keep pressing into the emotions of Canadians and making them believe that we came in and we ravaged this country and took everything over. And it's just not true. The graves are empty, and we acknowledge many Indian children died during this time period, but so did white children, European children. There were plagues, there was sickness, and we've had Michelle Sterling on the show. She'll be coming up in a couple of weeks again to provide us more information. So the whole scenario is falling apart, but they're still on the front lines, along with these corrupt government officials in legislatures claiming, land acknowledgements, and then all of this death and destruction without any facts or any evidence to support it. BC Supreme Court takes an axe to private property rights. That's again regarding the recent decision, and it encompassed private property owners' land. And in there, it was like, the Indian chiefs were saying, no, we're not going to take over the land and it'll all be okay. But in property in the Okanagan area in British Columbia, they have acknowledged this land right to the Indians. Existing people were there, and they have set up like water bottling companies, like to provide fresh water to the residents in the area. So one couple had spent $100,000 at the beginning of the year to set up their company by January to March, and by April, the Indian band was telling them, no, you got to shut it down. We got to reserve water. So do you think we're going to believe anything that they have to say? Oh, no, in the courts, take our word for it. We're not going to take your $1 million home. Don't worry about it. Okay, and then Parks Canada quietly drops. This is significant. I don't know if you heard about this over the summer, but Parks Canada quietly drops mention of genocide from residential school plaque because they were going to make a special honorary plaque for the Kamloops site. And of course, nobody's proven that there's any children there, 215 murdered and missing children. You remember Trudeau with his little teddy bear and his little photo op? It was disgusting. He should have been embarrassed. And of course, yeah, he wasn't. He was full on in on that, but that was them appealing to the sensitivities of Canadians again about all these poor missing murdered children, and it's all come up without any facts or evidence. So the fact that Parks Canada would quietly slip this out of it, that to say there was a genocide is significant, and it's a step in the right direction. This is BC's former top cop. He says he weighs in on secret grave claims. And in this article, really, he's quite outraged at the RCMP. It's like, do your job, do an investigation in the Kamloops land claim of these murdered and missing children buried in all these graves, and set the record straight. And so he's absolutely right. The RCMP, everybody is being controlled from the top down. I know there's many good RCMP officers who signed up for the right reasons. They had that calling to be a police officer and protect their communities and their families, and they're being stifled. Justice is being stifled at the hands. And I mean, the top RCMP cops in every single province should be fired. Like, get out of this position. And I'm sure they've got another operative that will possibly take their position, but we're demanding justice. This is a complete and total fraud, and it's costing Canadian tax dollars hundreds of billions of dollars. And now they're coming in and thinking they're going to steal our land. If they don't think this is going to turn out in civil unrest, I just don't know. They need to give their head a shake. Now, just about closing here. So a gentleman by the name of Brian Giesbrecht, he's a former judge. So the fact that he's been writing consistently about the Indians and the Indian Act and what the law actually says, and he has confirmed that in this recent, I believe this is in Manitoba, the Blood Lane First Nation in northeastern Manitoba has decided that it will ban non-Indigenous hunters from entering a huge swath of Crown land surrounding its reserve, and putting up blockades and saying no to hunters aren't permitted to go on Crown land. That is definitely not in Native or Indian territory, not at all. And the government has no right to be giving property away or Crown land away. And David will be getting into that. So make sure that you stay tuned. So he comes out and he's like sort of astonished here. He says, it's land, like their land. The problem here is that the person who wrote this article, the First Nations politicians, and even provincial politicians do not appear to understand that the land surrounding the Blood Vein Reserve is not its land at all. The land is Crown land. This reporter, like most CBC reporters, seems to believe that Indians are the owners of Crown land. The same reporters also appear to know very little about what numbered treaties actually say. I suspect they have never even taken the time to read them. And so he goes on to express and read the treaty. It's in the article, and he says, simply put, the Indians gave up all rights to the land. That land is not stolen land, it's not shared land, and it is certainly not their land. It was properly ceded to the government. And when the U.S. was coming in and they were killing many of the Indians back in the day, some of them were fleeing to Canada and they wanted protection. So in order for them, it was going to cost something for their protection, and these treaties were signed. You protect us, we're going to give you this land, and it's all fair and square. But that still has none of the reality of what the treaties actually say and limit the Indians to their reserve land is taking place, because this is part of a much grander campaign and initiative to rob Canadians of their of our natural resources worth trillions of dollars. And then, of course, this massive wealth transfer that's taking place and to control all citizens. 2.8 billion settlement reached in class action lawsuit over residential schools. This is a report from January of 2023, but you can see here as evidence the billions of dollars that Canadians are paying out for these frauds. And it's and we're not saying, again, I'm going to emphasize, we're not saying that there was no harm to any children at the residential schools. It's just that it's not to the magnitude that they have framed in order to advance UNDRIP and then take the land from Canadians, our property, and give it to the Indians. And then you can bet in the end that look at the reserves, look at what has happened. Do you really believe that the federal government or any level of government actually has their best interest at heart? So breaking news happened this past week. An 8-year RCMP investigation into BC Indian residential schools shows no evidence of murders or clandestine burials. And the report was actually about if there was sexual assaults, and the only person that they named, they referred to him as a pedophile, was actually an Indian. And we've already said that there's a national report on the missing and murdered women that is evidence of 86% of their own community is harming themselves. It's not Canadians. And so we need this all to come to an end. We need to tear up the treaties and the Indian Act, and we need everybody to be treated equally under the law, and we need to have peace and unity in Canada again. And that's not going to come until we have a significant legal action that is well framed, that is going to turn this around, and until we work extremely hard in the upcoming elections to replace every single one of these bad actors. And I know you say, Tanya, all the elections are rigged, but you know what? In the areas, that means that you are involved in every step of the process of every single election. We need more hands on deck. That's only one of the solutions. Okay, Heather, would you please bring David on?
It's always such a pleasure to have our good friend, David Lindsay, joining us on the Empower Hour. David has been involved in freedom issues for over 30 years. He's the author of several books, including The Annotated Criminal Charging Procedure in Canada, and he is the co-founder of Common Law Education and Rights, or C.L.E.A.R for short. Tonight, David is joining us to provide another powerful presentation on the rights of Canadians regarding land and property. Will you all please help me welcome David Lindsay. David, it's so good to see you once again. Welcome to the Empower Hour.
Thank you. Good to see you guys again as well.
All right, super. Thank you, Heather, and welcome, David, my friend. Welcome back to the show. I thought this was impeccable timing to have you on. I mean, all of these land claims, the land grabs, the Indians' accusations towards European Canadians. I mean, it has really, I don't know, ignited like all the fires across Canada right now that they're reporting on. I mean, it's insane. It's somebody I saw put like it's a hot mess in as far as what's going on in our legislatures and in the courts, in even entertaining these illegal and unlawful treaties and claims from all of these bands. So, anyways. Yeah, what do you have to say at the onset here after some of the headlines that I was presenting as well tonight before the show?
Well, I find it interesting. If the rule of law applies to everybody, these native bands, number one, should not be blocking access to federal crown lands and parks everywhere in Canada. That's number one. Number two, we shouldn't be allowing them to do it. The police should be there and stopping it on behalf of the Crown immediately. They have done nothing. They've given them basically a right of nonconformity to do whatever they want. Mm-hmm. So I'm not pleased with not only what they're doing, but I'm not pleased with the response of our own police departments throughout the country, who are basically allowing them to get away with this. And I have to state my philosophy is, number one, they were not first. Number two, there was never a nation. period. As you mentioned earlier, there were 600 plus bands, and they were all independent of each other, tribes. They were not one unified country or one unified government or a similar sort of status. They were not. And many of them were warring with each other. And, one tribe would war with another tribe, take their land, and then another one would war and take their land. And we came here, and who knows whose land it was, anyways. As you mentioned, they came in through immigration, and there's a lot of problems with their land claims. I think that the money that has been spent looking after them over the last few centuries is enough. It's
Absolutely.
enough. We don't need to pay them anymore. And the treaties are there, and that should be the end of the matter. I agree. The Indian Act, which has been revised, I think only twice. One was in 1876 and the other was 1950s, 51, circa. It needs to be looked at again, and we should be given the same. Well, everybody, as you said, should be the same. But there's a real problem with the Indians here in this country right now, and it's going to come to a real problem if people start really, really losing their land. It's going to be a problem.
Well, I agree, and it's come down to entitlement. And whenever the government is victimizing one certain minority group, whether it's the Muslims, whether it's the LGBT community, and the Indians, you got to say, okay, what's up? What's the greater plan behind this? Because we know it's not at face value. We know, as I said in the opening, that the government certainly doesn't care truly about the welfare of Indian families, and just by the way they have used them as pawns in this global campaign to steal property and rights from citizens around the world. Because it's happening in Australia, it's happening in New Zealand, it's happening in the US. They were making those efforts before Trump came in. It's certainly out of control in Canada. And when you were talking about, when we talk about the 640 tribes, I was listening to Alex Newman today. He did a special as well on the Indians in the United States. And he says, you got to remember, when the Europeans came to these lands, those tribes, these people, there was cannibalism, there was scalping, there was war between all of these tribes. They were uncivilized. And it doesn't mean that they didn't love their children and they didn't have a culture and a lifestyle, but it wasn't one where you could peaceably live in this environment and that it would progress. And that's what the Europeans gave when they came to Canada. And they could have come in, as I said, like the Muslims, and the Muslims are still doing this today. They're going in and massacring people, non-Muslims, Christians, Yazidis, whatever, and they're leaving nothing left for them. And do you think the UN is hollering about this and saying, the Muslims in all of the countries that they stole from Christians during those wars, that they need to go in and pay reparations, that they need to apologize and give this land back? Do you hear the United Nations saying any of this?
You'll hear nothing from the United Nations on that because it's not to their political benefit to do so, of course. We came here. Many people don't even realize the Indians never even had horses. They were brought here from Europe. And when in some of the reports that I have read, historically, and ironically, I hated history when I was in school, and now I absolutely love it. I wish I'd stuck with history more, but in the reports from some of the people that were here and gone back to England, they were referred to as savages for exactly the reasons that you had mentioned. And we came here and we brought law, order, and we brought values, morals, ethics. We brought the belief in God here as well, which none of them had anywhere here in North America, period. And many of these Indians who fled the U.S. because the U.S. were just decimating the natives, the Indians everywhere. I prefer the term Indians rather than natives. And they just decimated. So they flew in, came up into Canada And there were places in Alberta, for example, I think it was called Fort Whoop-Up, and they were it was just complete lawlessness. So the Crown brought in the RCMP, who were brought in just for the territory. And they came up through the US into Manitoba and then came west. And they set up forts and they set up places to hold people accountable for what they were doing. And I really believe the RCMP had its day. They did a good job when they were needed at the time in the 1800s. Their day is gone today. They shouldn't even be there anymore, but that's another story. But they did, and they got the trust of the natives throughout Canada, and specifically Western Canada, and that helped facilitate the signing of these treaties because the Indians trusted us to keep those agreements. And I think for the most part we have. And if I can say that, I think the natives have got millions of times more than what the land is worth, the value. It reminds me of a mortgage or usury banking system in a way. You just never stop paying. And when does the reparations, the payment have to end that we've been paying them? They've got billions of times more than they should have gotten. And that needs to end as well with the payments that have been made. But they trusted us, and they never would have got that same treatment with the U.S. government. They would have done the same thing up here. But they got our protection over the years, and there's a principle of law. It's called protection equals subjection. And you see it in nature. If the cubs want protection, it does what the mother bear tells them to do. And you see it in law. If you want protection from, in this case, the Crown, then you're subject to the Crown's laws. And what incentive is there for us to protect you if you're not going to do what we tell you to do? There's no incentive for us to do it. And, if there are several court cases that specifically talk about the honor of the Crown in dealing with the Native community. And my automatic response is, well, what about the honor of the Crown to us? We're the subjects. We're the ones that gave you that power in the first place to be the king. And it's a contract, as Halsbury, Coke, and virtually every judge in England has admitted. It is a contract. And if the king or queen is going to break the terms of that contract and renege on its agreement with us, then why should we obey the Crown's laws in that context as well? Now, the natives, of course, the Indians, I'm sorry, they entered into these agreements and they trusted us, and we've kept our word. And I think we've done it more than enough. The time has come now that they need to end, and all land is and should be vested in the name of the Crown. And everybody has the same equal rights and claims to the land that would have with anybody else, for example. One of the things I did want to mention tonight is the concept of property. And many people will think of property similar to that pen, for example. They think property is an inanimate object or something you can touch. But it's not. Property is basically a claim to something. And you can have two types of property. You can have what's called property in rem, which is property to a thing or an object, including land. Or you can have property in personam, which is property to an obligation. So we have property rights in personam to the monarch, to the king, because we have a contract with them, and they have duties to fulfill to us. With respect to the land, the king has duties to us to protect us in property rights as well. And all of the king's powers and duties originated in our common law, which in turn came back from the principles of Christianity, of course. And when our settlers came here, the law followed the flag. And when they sat down here and settled in here, all our Christian principles came with us, and the laws of England flowed from here as well. And as long as that king is in power, then those principles of Christianity are still part of our Constitution and still remain to the present day. And the king is required to uphold them throughout the realm, period. So they came here and they set up organizations, which eventually became cities, towns, provinces, and so on, right? And then the king would uphold the principles of Christianity here, which included property rights.
In times of financial uncertainty, securing your wealth is more important than ever. With inflation, market instability, and economic challenges, many Canadians are turning to one timeless strategy: precious metals. Gold and silver have historically retained their value, offering a hedge against economic turmoil and a safeguard for your assets. If you're looking to invest, there's good news for members of Action for Canada. We're proud to announce our partnership with Steve Merrill of Sun City Silver. Steve is not only a friend of the Freedom Movement, but he's also offering Action for Canada members exclusive access to some of the best pricing in Canada. Thanks to his extensive client base and affiliation with Silver Gold Bull, you can now secure your precious metals at incredible rates. Silver Gold Bull is a trusted Canadian leader with live pricing available 24/7 and nearly 400,000 five-star reviews on Trustpilot. When you purchase through Steve, you're not only investing in your future, you're also supporting the Freedom Movement, as a percentage of each sale helps support Action for Canada. Plus, there's a bonus. If you place an order of $5,000 or more, you'll receive a 1-ounce pure silver bullet, a unique and valuable addition to your collection. And if you refer someone who places a $5,000 order, you'll get another silver bullet as a thank you. To get started, visit actionforcanada.com/purchasing-precious-metals/. Remember, your decisions are your own, and we recommend doing your own research before making any investment. But with Steve Merrill's guidance and our partnership, you'll be on the right path to securing your future. Secure your assets, protect your future, support the movement. Visit us today to learn more.
So when the king came here, for example, there was two types of land. You had crown land, which was basically everything owned by the crown. And then you have land rights, which were in fee simple. And those land rights in fee simple are the highest property rights that you can have to the land, because the absolute ownership vests in the crown. And for evidence of that, look at the land titles registry, right? If you want to have land, you have to register it with the monarch, with the king, through their land titles offices. And so you get these property rights in and to the land. You get to sell the land, you have rights in it to use it as you want, and so on. But it is subject, those rights are subject to reasonable laws passed by the monarch that don't violate Christian principles, of course. And they may also pass certain municipal bylaws or provincial taxing authorities that may exist as well on that land, because we do not own the land outright. We do not have and cannot have a allodial title in Canada to the land. The only person, the only entity that will have that, of course, is the actual king or queen themselves. They will have that property rights. And property, again, is the right to use, own, or dispose of something. And that's what we have property rights in and to the land. But the monarch has duties to us. The king and queen has duties to us. And when we buy that land, they have a duty to protect us in our property rights. Let me take you back, and I've talked about it in the past, to the Coronation Oath Act of 1688. And this act is what basically solidified the wording of the Coronation Oath to make sure everybody knew what it was going to be. And I'll just read you the opening paragraph because it's actually quite important. And it states, whereas by the law and ancient usage of this realm, in other words, it's already law. What they're reciting in this paragraph already exists. It's not creating anything new. The kings and queens have taken a solemn oath upon the evangelists at their respective coronations to maintain the statutes, laws, and customs of the said realm, and all the people and inhabitants thereof, in their spiritual and civil rights and properties. That is where your property rights first originated, as a recognition by the monarch that you have them. And in the course of their duties, which includes giving royal assent to legislation, they agree that they will protect you in your property rights. And that is an obligation, constitutionally speaking, upon the king or queen to us as their subjects, not necessarily to the Indians. Their only obligation to the Indians are what's in the treaties, and that's it. And those treaties, as we've all talked about, have been paid for many times over, right? And consequently, when the monarch takes that oath to uphold God's laws, if the honor of the crown is at stake to uphold the contracts with the natives, how much more is the honor of the crown at stake to uphold their contract with us to protect us and our property rights? And if the crown has represented to us that we can buy land and register it with the crown and own it in fee simple, and we have that property right in the land, then the king or queen has a constitutional duty to protect you in that. They can't just go and give it away and take that land away from you. So one of the things that, pulling Christianity, of course, is that there's a number of sections in the Bible that specifically state that when you go into a new land, that you're not supposed to be making contracts and treaties with these people because they don't believe in God, and you're just going to get yourself in a lot of trouble by doing it. And that's clearly what has happened here. I think if you look at Exodus, Deuteronomy, and a number of other sections, you'll find those provisions that we're not supposed to be entering into those treaties. Despite that, in our particular situation, the kings in the past have gone and done that, and they've entered into these treaties, and for the most part, excuse me, they have kept those treaties. And then when you fast forward a bit to say 1871, British Columbia at that point joined the Union. And I want to emphasize, because even one of the natives at this video you showed me earlier, Tanya, one of the natives was calling it Confederation. Canada did not confederate in 1867. It was a statute of England, the B&A Act, that was passed for a union of 4 provinces to be called the Dominion of Canada, and it had provisions for other provinces to join in as well. BC took advantage of that, and they joined. And when they joined, they entered into what was called the Terms of Union for joining it. And I want to read a paragraph of those Terms of Union. It's paragraph 13, and it states, "The charge of the Indians and the trusteeship and management of the lands reserved for their use and benefit shall be assumed by the Dominion government." There's more paragraphs there, but it's not relevant. The point being is, when BC joined Canada, all power over the natives and their lands reserved for them went to the federal government. And that's because it is in Section 91, sub 24 of the British North America Act, where they are given power over Indians and all their lands. And that land is to be used and held in trust pursuant to the treaties. They would be held in trust. And many of them refer to the Indians as Her Majesty's Indians, or His Majesty's Indians, as the case may be. And consequently, the federal government is the one who has the power when dealing with Indian lands to deal with them. I don't believe David Eby for the province of BC has the constitutional power to divest the province of lands and give them to the natives. I don't believe he has that constitutional power. I see nothing under Section 92, which is the federal or provincial powers, that allows him to do that. I see federal jurisdiction, but that federal jurisdiction is pursuant to the treaties, not to give our land away, which is crown land, and what we have settled on representations from the king that we would have that land. Many of the letters patent that were issued to people, especially in Ontario, or forever in perpetuity. And those letters patent are binding in law as well. So when David Eby is talking about and has gone and accepted DRIPA into our own law, I don't believe he has the power to do that. And I don't think the legislature had the power to pass that law. Why it hasn't been challenged, I can only say it's the same reason none of the lawyers challenged Mike Farnworth when he passed the emergency order for COVID in March of 2020. It was clearly a violation of the Emergency Act in British Columbia, which did not allow for him to do it, as it only applied to natural disasters like hurricanes, floods, and so on. But he went and did it anyway. Where were the lawyers? Where were they to stand up and challenge it? And they did absolutely nothing. And of course, now with the legislation coming in to consolidate the Law Society under the provincial government, the lawyers are going ballistic, wanting everybody to help them and support them. But they, for the most part, they've never done anything to help anybody except take all their money away. No matter what happens in court, they're the ones that always win, right? So I'm really concerned that David Eby is giving up this land and doesn't have the power to do it and has not been challenged on it as of yet. It definitely is going to take a bit of work and research. One of the things that bothers me is that many of the books, the historical books that existed when I was in school, are gone now. They've been rounded up by the governments. And many of the stuff in there that supported our position are harder, if not impossible, to find anymore. Let me give you one example. I got into the Supreme Court of Canada library one day, years and years ago. And folks, that library is just massive. It's got shelves and shelves going as far as you can see to the other end of the building in the basement. There's books in there that they don't have anywhere in Canada, but the judges have access to. So if they want to make decisions, they have access to this material, but how are we to argue it when we don't have access to the same material? And the same thing applies to a lot of the books and historical books that were written about the Indians, how they lived, what they were like when we found them, the nature of treaties, and so on. Many of these books have simply disappeared and vanished now. And we need to find out where they are and get them back, because a lot of the truth will be in there to support what we're doing. There's a good book out there. It's called Not Stolen. I forget the author now, but it's a good book on there detailing how the lands were not stolen by us, period. And they didn't, the natives, the Indians, they didn't even have a concept of land ownership. They didn't know what it was. They simply lived where they lived and moved, and when weather got bad or natural disasters occurred, they would move somewhere else. There was no concept of land ownership as we know it today. For them to claim they own that land when they never even knew what land ownership was, in my opinion, is a lie. It should not have happened. So the legislation taking DRIPA into our law in BC from the United Nations is a violation of our provincial and national sovereignty. The BC government, I don't believe, had the power to do that. I don't believe the federal government has the power to do that. We need to get rid of the UN. There's a major source of problem right there. Again, let's go back to the source. What is starting all this? It's the UN. Get rid of them. We need to get out of the UN. And we need to find reasons that the public will appreciate, like protecting our national sovereignty. Most people have no idea the power of the UN behind the scenes and what they're doing. They simply have no idea. And if they knew what they were doing and the power that we have given them and given up our sovereignty to do so, I think there would be a major, major outcry against what the UN, not only what they're doing, but our acceptance of their principles and philosophies, because many of them simply never applied to Canada in the first place, and they should not have just been taken and applied here, right? So there's a lot of concerns with what's happening with the natives blocking all these lands that they never had power over. I think more reports, the RCMP report that came out and basically said all the land claims for graves and so on are completely unsupported. There's nothing there. Everything I'm starting to think with the Indians, they're like the government. Everything they say is a lie, and everything they have they have stolen. They've got so much from us. It's time to just say, that's it. It's enough. You're going to make do, and you're going to do with what you've got, and we're going to go from there. If there's treaties in place, I think the treaties would simply be a respect, if anything, for whatever share of land they had, and the payments end. Because we've simply paid the billions of times more than what it's worth. And if the common law really doesn't really recognize the concept that contracts can go on forever, it should end. The payments need to end. And once those payments end, you will see a major change in the natives, in the Indians, because they will have to start working and start doing things on their land, right, to make it there. So I'm also concerned about the king, who has violated their oath to the property owners on these lands as well. The king represented that these people would have access to these lands, registered them in land titles in the king's name, and represented that they would have it contractually. And they would have rights in the land to do what they wanted as long as they wanted to own that land until they sold the land or disposed of it. And for the king now to come up and divest himself of that without our permission is a violation of that sacred contractual promise that he made to us. The treaty should never have been entered into, but they were. And his duties and obligations, if he is going to have honor, those duties and obligations, they lie to us first. Before the Indians, they lie to his subjects. And if they don't, and he's going to break that, then, in my opinion, I think we're under a duty to protect your own land and do what it takes to protect that land. And to simply say to the king, if you are breaking the original fundamental contract between us, it's over. And we're simply not going to comply with your laws anymore. Now, I don't mean to say that's without risk or anything else. I mean, anybody who wants power is going to use force to try and maintain that power. But this is one of the reasons I've advocated for peaceful civil disobedience for many years. And the concept of peaceful civil disobedience originates in the Coronation Oath, because if the monarch breaks that oath, then the contract is over and we can cancel it in whole or in part and refuse to obey it. So I think that we need to keep in mind too, if there's one thing I hope you can take away today, is keep in mind the concept of property. That it is not the tangible issue. Property is not land. Property is a claim to the land. And the Indians never had claims to the land to begin with, because they had no concept of what land ownership even was. And they certainly had no rights in fee simple to the king, other than the treaty lands that were given and signed by them. And I think that ends the matter. The rest is crown land throughout the country, and the duties and obligations to maintain that rest in the king. And they do not rest in the king, whether it's in Parliament or the province, to give those lands away where people are on the land and have bought property on the land under the representations from the king that they would be protected in their property rights. That is a constitutional duty. And the property rights to be protected are not only chattels, but include real property as well. And real property is claims to the land. So I think that, one other thing I wanted to mention. It came to my attention some years back that suddenly the natives are calling North America Turtle Island and claiming that the whole of North America it belongs to them. Going back to what Tanya said, there were 600 some odd tribes in Canada, North America, as the case may be. There's probably thousands in North America. They don't own, they're not one legal entity or person that owned everything. They weren't, and they're not today. To say that Turtle Island all belonged to the natives is a complete lie and misrepresentation. There is no such concept or land as Turtle Island. They don't own North America, and they never did own it. And The natives who are also starting to get violent, they've been misrepresented too over the years as to what they owned. They, well, the stuff that I got taught at school with the books was very clear. They were savages, and they were skinning each other. They had all kinds of wars and tribal wars that were happening and so on. They had no concept of land ownership or any of the concepts of, we call it responsible government, although there's definitely work to be done in that area. But the concept is they never had that idea of government. It simply didn't exist. And they've got a lot of benefits, a lot of inventions, and a lot of money from us over the years, even if they don't live on treaty lands. A lot of that money has gone to chiefs who have squandered it from their own people. And the chiefs are as corrupt as many of the people in our own government. And I've been on some of these tribal reserves, and I see the way that some of these people are living. It's not very good on some, right? So in conclusion, I think what we need to do is stand on guard for thee. And that's something the monarch and the king and our governments need to be doing, in addition to each and every one of us. All of us have to be doing that. And we need to make sure that these lands are not given away. With respect to what David Eby is doing, the DRIPA legislation that was passed needs to be challenged. And it needs to be challenged in a way by lawyers who have a vested interest. Maybe their land is going to be at stake, so they have a vested interest in making sure the research is done and the case is won properly. Because if you don't have the evidence, you're not going to win. We need to have that before the court by lawyers who have a vested interest in the matter, so that they will do the case and they will win it on our behalf. And then we need to get rid of DRIPA, and we need to assert our common law and our Constitution and the supremacy of God once again in our law, both provincially and federally. And keep in mind, the province cannot delegate to a municipality more powers than it has. And if the province can't do what it's doing, then neither can the municipalities, such as the city. They're constrained under the Local Government Act of BC and the Community Charter. And I went and looked through those. There is nothing in there. There is not one statute or clause in those two statutes that give a municipality the power to dispose of land or to enter into treaties with natives of any kind. If any city or municipality is doing that, they don't have the power constitutionally or even in statute. They don't have the power to do that. And let's get rid of the politics out of here. And if it involves being mean, the time has come to be mean. Be polite, be respectful, but be assertive. And I learned years ago that if you don't have something, then you ask for it and you say, please. If you have a right to something, you demand it. That is the legal definition of what a demand is. And we need to start demanding that our property rights are respected and upheld and are not taken from us in order to give to Indians who never had it in the first place. Mm-hmm. And I end with one final comment, and I repeat it again. They were never here first, and they were never a nation. And we need to remember that concept.
There we go. Thank you, David, so much for those words and for clarifying our founding documents, the Coronation Oath. I know a lot of people, a knee-jerk reaction or response is that the king signed the Coronation Oath, and it's like, well, he's with the WEF, and he's an enemy of the state and the member nations, and all of that may be true, but the fact of the matter is he took the oath. He swore the oath, so he is obliged to uphold the oath. And so that's one very important response that I wanted to articulate. The other side has this uncanny way of waving their magic wand and saying, thus it is so, no matter how illegal it may be, against our criminal code or against our Constitution, and they make it happen and they move forward. And we actually have, and you have named those documents and sections, we actually have the rule of law and the Constitution and our founding documents on our side. And so what we have been teaching for the last decade, and especially during COVID, is you don't ask if they're imposing themselves and violating your rights. You stand up and you demand your right and you assert your right. And so it's not mean. We're not being mean. It is a matter of upholding justice.
Yeah. You know, if you have a contractual right to something, most people insist on their rights in that contract. Why do they back down on constitutional rights and freedoms that they have a right to as well? I don't know, but we need to assert them and more and do that. I've said before, and I'll repeat it. There is no other system of law in the world that is better and gives you more freedom than our common law.
Mm-hmm.
And it was based on God's law in the Bible that you were created free, just don't harm somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to find a starting spot any better than that in law. And it certainly isn't going to be Indian law.
No. And when you talk about that, about the being the best system in the world, and I've repeatedly said this, if you compare how Canada is governed, our rule of law and our constitution, and it's based on Christian biblical principles, and then you take a look at, I know at nauseam I'm going to say this, but maybe somebody is listening today who needs to hear this. You've got 56 Islamic majority countries, you've got North Korea, you've got Pakistan, you've got India. None of these nations are living under the kind of democracy and freedom that we have been so blessed and have experienced in European Christian nations. And it is phenomenal that people get themselves so deep into victimization that I don't even think with the Indians at this point, they know what they're giving up until it's going to be too late, until they get their way. And if that happens, my thing is, okay, so say all of us horrible white European colonialists move from Canada, we should shut down all the oil and gas. We need to close down all the gas stations, turn off all the power supplies, and let's leave them how we found it. But
Yeah.
what do we do? Do we go and overturn the Roman Empire? Do we overturn the wars that have passed since? We didn't come in warring. We unfortunately came in signing treaties, and we should have never done that because we would not be in this mess today had our fathers of Confederation not done this. And okay, so
sorry.
yeah,
Oh,
go
I was
ahead.
just going to say that, you know what, the treaties that are there preserve for the Indians their rights for hunting and fishing. They didn't even have fishing rods that we know of today and the lures and everything else today. So we were taking everything back. All our inventions, all that would come. If they were going to do hunting and fishing, we'd take the horses back because we brought them as well. And if they want the land and they want it originally as they had it and everything else that it originally was, you're not going to get any benefits that you have today from us as well. And you're going to be significantly worse off than you are now.
Absolutely. And it's not a knock against, there's many, it's like, well, we could say there's so many nice people. It's not about whether people are nice or not. It's about that they are running roughshod over our laws and our constitution. We got to say enough. And you know what? They're certainly not worried about offending Canadians. And so we can't stop pursuing justice for the fact that we might offend somebody or because we can feel that we need to continue to accommodate them. If they're going to get these land grabs, then boy, by gum, you better pay back the hundreds of billions of dollars we've paid your band. And you know what? All those numbers are documented, and it just can't come to that. What needs to happen is we need to pursue ripping up these treaties, and especially the most recent ones, like handing Vancouver City over to the Indians as well. And you just said municipalities do not have this power. It's
Right.
them waving their silly magic wand and pandering politicians who think they're going to get some brownie points for this somehow. They are out of their mind. They are not thinking clearly, and I don't know if they're receiving some reparations themselves, these elected officials. I mean, why in the world would anybody do this to their nation? Just to destroy it.
I'm at a loss. Why they would pass DRIPA in the first place? There is only one answer. They're being threatened, extorted, or bribed.
Well, when it happened in BC, I happen to know a city councillor who had been invited onto the team, the committee, sorry, for the province in order to implement and advance the DRIPA. And she ended up pulling out because at one point it was John Horgan back then in 2019. He's passed away since, and David Eby kind of stole that position. I don't think he's our real premier, but that's besides the point. I digress. The point is that all of these individuals, he was the AG at the time, all of these individuals were involved in these backroom deals that were secretly being made without the public's attention, and those individuals were dealing with the United Nations. Justin Trudeau had come waltzing into this committee room, and he had conversations with individuals, and this person was actually afraid for their life because if they had exposed what was going on in the room, and she says it was so horrific, Canadians wouldn't believe it, if they had relayed. And so this has been going on for a long time in the background without public awareness. It's in violation of our Constitution. We're going to repeatedly say that. David has brilliantly, simply spelled it out tonight of what are 100% guaranteed, God-given inalienable rights. Where the king or the queen, has rule over the land, God has rule over them. And you know what? The Bible says we have the right to life, liberty, and security of the person. That means I get to secure my property. And we need to really begin to educate other Canadians. And we're going to ask you to help Action for Canada doing that by sharing this Empower Hour when we post it tomorrow. We are finally posting on YouTube as well. Action for Canada is on YouTube. They're not censoring us anymore. Trump has done some real business down in the United States against censorship. And there's a larger audience there that we haven't been able to tap into. So please help us by joining our Empower Rumble, joining our YouTube, and getting our information and sharing it on social media. Also, I'm going to ask that you donate to Action for Canada. We've had a very slow summer, but David knows we've been in the background doing some significant work on this issue. And I will not go, we are not able to go into detail at this point, but I want you to know we didn't stop this summer. I would love to have 2 weeks off. David needs 2 weeks off, right? But we know that we're in a war and our foot is on the gas pedal on multiple issues, and we're not stopping until this job is done. And I know that somebody in the chat had posted about a legal action, PHARA, P-H-A-R-A, that is transpiring right now because the Indians have come into, I'm sorry, can you name the community is it on the island? And they want to take the WEF, the UN, they want control of all of our natural resources, and that includes water. So you remember what I just said about that couple that had gotten this business going where they were going to supply clean drinking water, and all of a sudden the Indians say no. So they've got control of the water. And then as well, you've got our bodies of water, whether lakes, rivers, or the ocean, and they're also trying to take strategic pockets of land, parcels, much more than that, and they're trying to take control of those lands because they are effective waterways, whatever the purposes may be. You've got ports. Natives are trying to buy one of our ports right now. I think that should be an absolute no-go because we know the direction this is going. So please help us out. Help David out. He's at C.L.E.A.R. Okay, so as you know, the common law, education, and rights. He's doing multiple legal actions right now, still against the city of Kelowna, fighting for our right for free speech. He's been under house arrest because of this. I mean, when we're on the front lines, please don't worry about tax receipts. I'm not a charitable organization. David's not a charitable organization. We don't want to be restricted by the government. But where we end up restricted is by Canadians who only want to donate, or businesses because they get a tax rate in return. We're beyond that. Action for Canada is one of the organizations doing the best work in this nation. We need support. David is doing phenomenal work as well. He needs support. So make sure that you go to his website and donate to him today. Now, David, we're at the top of the hour, but I took up a bit of time because of those headlines. I just wanted people to know where we're at in the country, and that's just a smidge of what's going on. But I'm going to go through a few rapid questions. Let's try to answer these as quickly as possible. So this one it's like, what will happen to our rights now that the government signed them over to the WHO? So, Marie-Anne, they can't sign our rights over to the WHO. The World Health Organization and the United Nations are unelected bodies. All right. David said it. I've said it a gazillion times. We have to exit the United Nations. They call it the Red-Green Alliance. Okay. Communists and Muslims. Muslims make up a third of the United Nations member states, and the other 2/3, you can bet, is communism. This is not a body that is working in the best interest, has any interest in protecting sovereign nations or their rights. They've overstepped. We need to get out of the UN. So don't use their language. Don't give them control that they don't have. You tell the government, you sign on to those treaties, we're going to assert our civil disobedience, and we are not going to comply. And we as a nation need to understand what our rights are, stop kowtowing, cowering, bowing down to these globalists who are sending a message that is completely unclear. Remember, I've said, knowledge is power. In the right hands, it's a very powerful tool, and we need Canadians educated. Okay,
May I add a comment to that,
yeah,
Tanya?
please, yep.
Our rights are in the contract with the king. He does not have the power, and there's nothing in there that allows him to assign those powers, those rights, duties we have to anybody else. There's no power of assignment in that constitution. How would you feel if suddenly Canada signed your right to life and liberty under Section 7 to an international body? How would you feel about that, knowing that suddenly your constitutional right to life and liberty is being dealt with by the UN? That's what's happening with our property rights right now. And it's just as serious and just as important that we realize the federal and provincial governments do not have the power of assignment of our constitutional rights and liberties to the United Nations at all.
That's exactly right. You turn to them and say, hogwash.
Yeah.
Let's go talk a little British here. Jenny will score me. Okay, it is. That's what it actually is. Okay. All right. So again, this is a question that should be okay. If BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and territories separate from Canada, what happens to treaties with First Nations?
You know what? Let me comment about that for a minute. And it's really important. I hope we still got a couple minutes.
Yep. For you,
Okay.
David.
We've talked about Alberta separating. And you know what? For the first time in history, negotiations are not going to be the same as it was. When the four provinces came for the Quebec conference in 1864 and the London conference in 1867, they were all Christians, and predominantly, if not all, they were white people. They were English, and some of them were French. If you renegotiate today, you're going to be sitting at a boardroom table with Muslims, Arabs, Indians, and a host of other people that have no idea of our concept of freedom and the importance of it. All these people are going to want to have a say. 7% of the people in Alberta identify now as Islam. They're going to want to be at the bargaining table. So when people come up with this concept, we need to renegotiate, Alberta has to separate, or these provinces, and it has to be done by the people. Well, by the people today does not have the same meaning as by the people 150 years ago. And you're going to have a lot of people that are going to be advancing interests that are not going to be to our benefit, and that we are going to lose our rights and freedoms are on in the future, while the state would get more power over us as a result. So when you mention that, it's a good point. Only the federal government can deal with land claims. And when the Quebec succession reference case happened, the Supreme Court set out a procedure to follow. You have to have a referendum on a clear question, and that gives you the authority to go to the bargaining table to negotiate. But it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to still separate. Because think of it this way, Alberta has contracts with people all over the world. The people in Alberta have contracts with people all over the world. If you separate from Canada, it's going to affect everybody else. You can't just walk out of your contracts because it will affect everybody else. So you need to negotiate what will happen with those land claims. Many of the natives, they don't want separation. They want to deal with the federal crown on behalf of the monarch because that is where they see historically their protection to be. And they don't believe they're going to get the same protection at a provincial level as they're getting from the federal crown right now in England.
That's a really sorry, that's a really good point, David. And I know that Jeff Rath was out there on a stage. I was watching a clip today. He's a lawyer that has spent a lot of time. I'm sure I don't want to put it this way, but it's probably made a lot of money because these lawyers that are representing the Indians are making a ton of money. These cases go on for 10 years or 15 years. It's nonstop work. And so he was talking about including the treaties in the new constitution in Alberta. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Look how much damage these treaties have caused to the Indians and to the European Canadians. It's really time to tear them up. And so I think that's the direction we need to go. But I'm going to emphasize something here as well, because I know several years ago, people were so used to hearing that we're a multicultural nation and we're a secular nation, and we're absolutely not. Multiculturalism must abide by the charter, all right? The supremacy of God and rule of law, anything comes after that means that even multiculturalism, people that come to Canada need to integrate, assimilate, and accept our principles and values. But you're not hearing that. You're not hearing that in the courts right now, but we're moving towards cases that are going to finally overturn what's these interpretations that have been had. We're not a secular nation. And people want to say, well, there's so many atheists in Canada, so many different cultures in Canada. Tanya, how can you say that? Are you beginning to get it? How valuable it is to have a nation founded on Christian biblical principles? I've named all the other countries that are going to hell in a handbag. You can see clips from Ireland, Britain, all over New Zealand, Australia. If you're watching on social media right now, hundreds and thousands of citizens are coming out to the streets, born and raised, citizens from these countries. They've got huge stop mass immigration, but they're also huge banners that say, this is a Christian, New Zealand is a Christian nation, Australia is a Christian nation, Europe is a Christian nation. I mean, this is fantastic. Canada needs to get to the streets. We need hundreds of thousands of Canadians out there saying, this is a Christian nation. And it's far different than those Palestinian mobs, mob fests that are taking place in our streets. Evil, destructive. It just shows you the difference. So pick a side, understand what you're fighting for, and get busy. And stop criticizing anybody, just in case you are, that if we're saying this is a Christian nation, you need to start considering what that has granted you and how blessed you have been. And so, David, just a couple of more questions and then we'll wrap it up.
Sure.
It says, with eminent domain, the authorities can take land away after paying what they think is fair. Am I right? Eminent domain?
I'm not sure I understand the question. I'm familiar with eminent domain a bit, but I'm not sure if I understand the question.
It says the authorities can take land away after paying what they think is fair.
Well, like on an individual basis, you have rights in fee simple, which means if they're going to take your land away to build a highway, for example, they have to give you what the property in that is worth. They can't just expropriate you and not give you anything. So on an individual basis, that's what that means. But with respect to the monarch, they do have eminent domain over all crown land, and they own it completely. And we don't have a claim to it other than the fee simple claim that we have. And the natives, the Indians, all they have is a claim to the land that has been set aside as them for reserves. And if that land was set aside by the king, that presupposes that the land was the king's to begin with,
Mm-hmm.
not theirs.
Okay, so I've got another one. This is terrible, Jesse. I'm feeling for you. I used to have a tenant myself in my home. I own several rental properties, and one of my tenants is an Indian, as or Native American, as he foolishly likes to be called. She said, for the past 3 months now, he refused to pay rent and refuses to leave, and continues to cite that he owns the land under the building and that he belongs there. What do I do? I'd say you need to go to the residential tenancy. You need to file a complaint. The other way you can go about this is if you have a family member that you want to bring home and move into this property, you could just deal with it in that manner. David, do you have anything else to add to that?
I missed the last part of it because I had a phone ringing here, but they have a rental unit with a native or Indian person in it. And
Yeah, and he's saying he's not paying rent for the last 3 months because he says he owns the land under the building and that he belongs there.
yeah, you know what? Take him immediately to the rental board. I wouldn't even be waiting. I would get him there quickly
Yeah.
and do everything possible to get him out. And the best thing to do is say that you're going to have a family member move in,
Yeah.
even if it's only for a month or 2 or 3 months. That yeah, you're going to have a family member move in, or claim you need to do it for renovations.
Well,
But
and the other thing though
get
is
him out.
you're in a perfect situation because they've already in arrears for 3 months.
Yeah,
And so I think that you'll have all the support that you need. Just one
yeah.
from Peter here. He has specified what PHAR, PHAR means, Pender Harbor and area residents.
Okay.
And so that is a case that's going on here in British Columbia. They need people to be more aware of that case. Maybe I should do a show on that one day. But
If I can just make another comment on that, sorry. The fact that the Indian has been renting from you amounts to a recognition or a waiver that he owns the property. Why would he rent from you if he owned the property? So I would argue what's called estoppel. He is stopped from arguing that it's his land because he's renting from you in the first place and always was. If he owned the land, why would he have come up to you and say, "Can I rent it off of you?" There's no logic behind that. So I submit that he's waived if he had any claim, and I say if, yeah, it's been waived, and certainly estoppel would apply that he doesn't own it, and he can't come and argue now that he does because he's been paying the rent and agreed to pay you the rent for these months as well.
Perfect. Yep, nicely done, David. I 100%. Great, great information. And so we're going to wrap the show up now. I just always appreciate it because I know you're preparing for court next week. You just finished preparing for court this last week. You were in Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday in court. You guys, do you know this man is working around the clock for Canadians? Because what happens in Kelowna, this is going to set a precedent. The corrupt individuals from BC, is it BC Health, from the health department in BC, and as well in the city, in the courts. I mean, it's hard to believe that this is Canada. It really is, when I have the amount of conversations with David and hear what this man has been going through, and that the majority of Canadians don't know about it. So David, do you want to give a quick update or what's coming this week as well? Pray for him.
Just there's two cases right now. One is the city's injunctive relief to try and get us banned from using the operative park that we were using for 5 years to protest against COVID, and we still have them there once a month. And they want to stop us primarily because they say that they don't want us using sound equipment, which means you're just supposed to stand there and look at each other and that's it. So I filed a SLAP application against them. Strategic lawsuit against public participation, and it's here in BC, Ontario, and Quebec, and it's designed to stop litigation where people, very powerful people, are trying to use their power to shut down freedom of expression, and that includes in my position in this case, the city and its bylaws. They're trying to say we're having an event. It's not defined. Everything is undefined, and it's the first time in Canada that somebody has tried to say that SLAP legislation applies to a city using its bylaws to shut down freedom of expression or any government. Mm-hmm. The city has admitted it's a precedent. The judges had admitted it's a precedent. And we just finished 4 days of long arguments last week on it and 3 days last year. So we had 7 days of argument on it. And now we're just waiting for a decision on that issue. And we'll go for there. And the other issue, of course, is the falsified assault charge they did on me for allegedly touching somebody. And yeah, I can't say much more on that right now because I'm still under a probation order, but hopefully that will change in the next week. And I might be able to give you more information after that.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks for that update as well. And just a closing word of encouragement to our viewers.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? When it comes to rights and freedoms, use them or lose them.
Nicely said. Okay, my friend. Thank you so much, David. We look forward to having you again on in the future. God bless you.
Thank you, guys. God bless. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. For the next few weeks, we're going to be dealing with this issue. Next week, I have Dallas Brody coming on. She is an MLA here in British Columbia, and she boldly and courageously stood up and made statements about the fraud that is going on in Kamloops. She had just gotten elected as part of the new BC Conservative Party. And after making those statements, she was told by the head of the party, John Rustad, to take those statements down. And she, out of conviction, said, no, I can't do that. And he ousted her from the party, and she has bravely moved ahead and created a new party, 1BC. And she is boldly speaking the truth on a number of subjects that are incredibly important to all of us. And so we want to hear her firsthand testimony and what she's been through, how she's exposing it, and how she's opposing it. Very brave lady. So be sure to join us next week. And now I want to just again make an appeal to you. It was a very quiet summer as far as donations were concerned. I know that a lot of people were on holidays, but like I say, Action for Canada, we haven't stopped working. And if you can become a monthly donor, that would be phenomenal. I am heading to Washington, D.C. at the end of the month. We'll be in Washington on the 29th, and I'll be returning on October 8th. This is part of the International Coalition for Children team that I've been on for the last 9 months, that we started 9 months ago. And as well, I will be having other meetings, regarding national security. And it's just really important. We've got to go there one way or the other. And it takes money. It takes funding. And I'm appealing to you today to support Action for Canada in the work that we're doing. You may have heard all over the news, CTV News, CBC News, Global News, all about what's going on in Alberta regarding the books. Danielle Smith has been knocking it out of the park as she has been addressing what they say is a book ban. She turned to the reporter and said it was many reporters in the room, and it was on another topic that they were addressing, but all the reporters wanted to talk about this book ban. And she says, look, this isn't a book ban. This is removing sexually explicit and pornographic material. And she goes, you know what? Maybe I'm just going to need to do this. I can't show it on the evening news, but they had a monitor set up there and they showed the graphic detail in these books to the reporters. And this is exactly what Action for Canada has been trying to expose for myself since 2016. I mean, I am so excited about this. Our team has done a phenomenal job working in Alberta to expose this information and to get these books removed. You'll hear that the government is putting a pause on removing the books. It isn't because they are backing up on removing the sexually explicit books, but there are activists on the Edmonton School Board who are now pulling traditional books that we have had in the schools for decades and decades, ones that are appropriate for kids to read. And so Danielle Smith says that maybe, they're doing a little vicious compliance there, and that we're going to put a pause on this so that we can hold their hand basically and let them know the type of books that we want removed that children should not be exposed to. We are also continuing to lobby government to apply this removal of these sexually explicit pornographic books from all of the schools throughout the province, but in their policy, it doesn't apply to 50 of the schools because they have public libraries in their schools. So as if it doesn't apply to public libraries. Well, Danielle Smith is coming out, and with all due respect, Premier Smith, this needs to cross over to every single library in your province, not even just the 50 public libraries that are in schools, but to every library. None of this material should be in the children's section. So anyways, like I say, working hard in the background. We're not stopping and we're not giving up. Okay, so in closing, as far as Bible verse is concerned, I had several verses that I thought were good for tonight. And so I'm just going to read that from something that I've prepared. So tonight, as we reflected on the rights to our land and property, I'm reminded of God's word. In Exodus 23:32-33, the Lord warned his people, you shall make no covenant with them or with their gods, lest they make you sin against me. Our nation's history shows what happens when covenants are made outside of God's design. They bring lasting consequences. But we also remember the truth of Psalm 24:1. The earth is the Lord's and all that is in it. Canada does not ultimately belong to governments or systems of man, but to Almighty God. And his desire is for peace and security. As Micah 4:4 declares, everyone will sit under their own vine and under their own fig tree, and no one will make them afraid. May we return to this vision to live under God's covering, in freedom and in blessing of his design for this land. And so I hope that blesses you, and thank you for joining us, and I'm going to look forward to seeing you next week. Like I say, it's an important show. God bless you, and God bless Canada.
And those with virtuous hearts will pursue it. You have a virtuous heart if you are here today pursuing freedom and righteousness. And then verse 23 comes along with a promise. God says he will turn the sins of evil people back on them. He will destroy them for their sins. I take great comfort in that, because I serve a mighty living God who has allowed us to go through this season of discomfort because we as a nation have turned our backs on him and we need to get right. So I am just going to thank you so much. I'm going to say God bless you and God bless Canada.